Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another episode of Card Talk with Tim and Harry, episode 9. Arise the Destroyers, the Necron raid is here. So we'll be talking a little bit about the Necron raid, just kind of how we're feeling about that, because I know it's still been kind of an interesting experience. Like, are raids helpful? Are they not? Who are they good for? But more than anything today, honestly, I'm excited, and Harry, as always, has been holding off, waiting to see these cards live. There's
Yeah.
there's some cool stuff going on for the Necrons, and as a Necron hater, I will
Oh,
eat
what? That's a strong word.
I will eat my words because they've really grown on me. I would say, like, outside of Scarabs, because that's just not my favorite deck. It's really grown on me with like some of the updates to like Implacable Conqueror and some of these other kind of like maybe not top tier builds, but like honestly fun and pretty competitive builds. But without spoiling too much, I really feel like this particular raid is bringing kind of like a whole new archetype. And I don't know that it's enough to make like a whole new type of deck, but there's definitely some crazy stuff going on. But before I get too carried away, I am joined by Harry as always. And how are you, my man? What's going on?
What's happening? Yeah, man. Same stuff. Not really too much. Oh yeah, WoW. Obviously, yeah. WoW expansion's been having me a bit, but a little bit of Warpforge. Oh yeah, mate, bro. Is there just too much Warpforge content to like to keep up with?
You're asking you're asking me. I mean, it's I honestly I felt like this month was going to be kind of slow because I wasn't, once we saw the balance patch, I was like, okay, that's not really going to do too much. So the rank season's probably going to be the same. Maybe we'll see the reinforcement, which we are, with the Necrons. So that kind of brings a bit of life. I mean, with the Gene Stealers, it did feel like there was like tons to cover. Like we had our 2 episodes that we did, one with just us and then Slither. Then there have been these system updates like with ranked. So I felt like the summer in particular was pretty busy, and then there was kind of a lull, but now we're back to looking at new content. So I mean, there is quite a bit going on. I think it's starting to kind of even out maybe a little bit, but it's made it fun to cover the game, that's for sure.
Because I feel like we were just doing the Gene Stealers like only like a little time ago. Then
Yeah.
then the rank thing, and
Hmm.
then like Titus come out,
Oh, that's true.
bro.
We got to talk a little bit about that too. I'm
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's probably one of my after the Tau guy, the alien looking one. I forget his name. Warp Shaper.
yeah.
After Warp Shaper, Titus is my next one.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I forgot that, like, we also had the draft event going on, which I
Yeah.
I put a bit of focus in for our alliance, which was really really fun. Shout out to Blue Blast, who literally had the highest number of skulls in the entire game. I think had
What?
3,000 skulls, so that's what that's 10 max win drafts or something. I forget the math, but literally highest in all of
Smashed it.
Warpforge.
Yeah.
So that kind of carried us, which was excellent. I think I got around 1,500. I wish I could have done a bit more. That was an interesting event, the Titus draft event. Like, I definitely heard some of the criticism, which was, had people been able to stockpile their Blackstones, they would have been able to like really, involve themselves much more with the event. But that was our first alliance event, and the prizes were like fine. There wasn't anything crazy with that, but it brought a bit of spice and life to the draft format, and yeah, I think, but I hope we see more of that. I imagine we will.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Like I did never done draft, so I had like loads of them crystals saved up.
Me too.
But I think like maybe reduce the cost to get in the highest one, but then reduce the reward. Just so
Yeah.
like it ain't 50. Because 50 was a lot.
50 is a lot when you consider how little you get from winning premium drafts and or getting Blackstones from the Forge, which is very, very small amount. And I think you get also Blackstone from your weekly chest, but it's certainly not a lot. And for the people who regularly draft, like that's kind of their jam. They basically couldn't play the event. So that I think was a pretty big problem. Yes, you could pay for Blackstone, but like again, I don't really want to encourage stuff like that. I feel like that kind of puts a bad taste in players' mouths. And we're talking a lot with Tyler, who is pretty active in our community and on Discord, and just kind of sharing like, yeah, this could have used. It was the first run, right? It was kind of the pilot of these alliance draft events, and conceptually seems cool. Definitely needs some tweaking. I was gonna say it didn't help, to be honest, that Space Marines have been so dialed down in terms of power level and had to face off against the highest win rate in Swarmlord for the Tyranids. Not every game, of course, like you couldn't guarantee getting Swarmlord, but just the Tyranids as a whole are relatively strong compared to the Ultramarines. So it was pretty hard to pick an Ultramarine Warlord and get to 12 wins. So I think they're balancing is going to affect those kind of events quite a bit. So I hope that they consider that a little bit more in the patches.
Yeah, it was so sad because obviously I was spending the 50 crystals, and then I was picking Titus because, mate,
he's
I
cool.
was like, I'm grabbing him, I'm going with him, and then like I think the most I won might have been 6. Yeah, so when I was playing Titus, I was losing a lot, but I was just enjoying it. I could have played Swarmlord, but the alliance was doing well with the rewards. Like I saw we were way up, like, and I was like, wow, Jesus, maybe I don't even need to play Swarmlord. Let's see how many I can win with Titus. But as soon as he come out, yeah, I've got him. I've been trying to make decks. I'm still in that. I've still got some experimenting to do with him, find a perfect deck for him. And the Necrons have dropped. And I feel like I'm going to have another sleep. And all of a sudden, the next one, the Imperials are going to drop. Like, there's not enough time in the day to play with what we've got. I still ain't even made a good Sabotage Gene Stealer deck.
Yeah, that's actually on my to-do list too. Yeah, you make a good point. There is actually quite a bit. Outside of like really try hard ranked, which like I was doing a lot last season, so it kind of felt okay. Well, these are the only decks that I can play. There really is a lot that's gone by in these last couple of weeks, and I think next time we see each other, which probably won't be more than a couple of weeks, we're going to have Imperial Guard reveals. I can't say for sure it's going to be October, but there's a sense that the full release of the game is going to happen because we're technically still in early access, which I know sounds funny, because it'll be a year since early access launch in October. And my guess is that they're going to tie in Imperial Guard, which is like a big face of the game, alongside Space Marines, into like, hey, come check out the fully released version of the game. We've got Imperial Guard, all that stuff. So it probably won't be that long before we're starting to talk about all that stuff.
So, that's what I'm saying. Things are just coming at us so quick.
Oh yeah, no, it's kind of crazy. So yeah, I mean that's all of the stuff that's kind of, thank you for pointing that out, Harry. That kind of got us caught up to today, and then we had of course Ecclesiarch, who's really in my mind like the Necron and Chaos person. He did the reveals last week, and so I've seen all these cards. Harry has not, so that's going to be always our style of just kind of seeing what we think of the cards. But yeah, I mean, Necrons, I think we're waiting for this for a bit. They'd been kind of, in their slumber, not terribly present in the meta before Scarabs came back on the scene. Like there was at least a full month or so where Necrons were seeing like a very, very low play rate. But obviously for the raid that drives it way up. And then, I think after all these cards are fully released and everyone gets their hands on them, I think there's going to be some pretty powerful stuff going on. We'll see, because the combo decks with Scarabs and Infestation are still there and still pretty potent. But I'm pretty hyped to get into these cards and see what you think, Harry.
Yeah, I can't wait. Let's have a look.
All right, man. Let's do it. Let's take a glimpse of what the future, Necron Lords hold. And we're going to start off, we're going to go by rarity just to kind of build that up. And we can kind of look at the power level as we go along. So the first card we're looking at is Annihilation Barge, 8 energy, 3/6 on the attack stats, 8 health. Just another big barge that we have. We have quite a few in the game already. Flying, Blast 3, definitely a really great stat, as more of these kind of go wide swarm strategies have gone. And then Artifice, deal 3 damage to the enemy with the lowest health. Yeah, initial impression seems fine. Doesn't seem obviously crazy for a common. I guess maybe you could live the dream, dealing 3 damage to the lowest health enemy, which could be like their warlord if you were able to keep things clear.
Yeah, if the board was empty.
What do you think?
Reminds me a bit like the Annihilator.
Wait, which guy is that? The
Space Marines tank. You know, the Annihilator, where it does 3 damage but it's the highest health.
Right. I didn't even catch that. Yeah.
So it's just the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is massive, and it does have an Artifice ability, which could maybe go crazy. I think what's tough about it is, like, how many times can you trigger Artifice, and, like, even though this is a 3/6 flyer with 8 health, so it's pretty chunky, this thing swinging at you is not that scary. I guess the Blast 3 and the Deal 3 combined, though, could be something. But yeah, I don't really know how these kind of like larger flying vehicles really fit in to Necrons overall. Like they buffed Command Barge, which is like okay. I think this card could be a decent performer in draft. That's kind of where I could see this. So
yeah, I think he's all right.
Slow moving but deadly is the text on the card. I would say that's pretty apt description. So that is the Annihilation Barge. Next up, we've got Awakened Destiny, which I think is going to be something. So I put the comparison here with Hosts of Chaos. So Awakened Destiny, 4 energy, stratagem, draw 2 cards, and for each troop drawn, create a reanimation protocol in your hand. And that's the 1 energy reanimate something. So it reminds me of Hosts of Chaos, right? You draw 2 except this costs 1 more, which makes sense because Reanimation Protocol is just such a solid card for most Necron decks. And so it operates similarly, where you could potentially draw 4 cards for 4 energy.
You need to be playing a troop deck, though.
You do, yes. I will say that is a restriction for the card, but I kind of like that there's something that's leaning more into the troops, leaning more, you can kind of see in the art like these Goss Immortals with their big guns and stuff. I do like that this is more for the reanimation stuff with like Imitech, with Orkin potentially if you're playing that kind of build. I feel like, although it's a common, and most are not going to be, game-breakingly good, what Necrons have always suffered from, and Imitech in particular, when he was weaker, is that he could run out of cards. And, like, if you didn't get the right setup with, like, reanimating stuff and kind of keeping yourself alive on board, you could just run out of cards to play. And so Awakened Dynasty really helps fix that, because you're getting a ton of value. I guess the worst case scenario you whiff on not having enough troops, but I think you just put this in a deck that has more than enough troops. So yeah. I think this card is sweet. That's kind of my initial impression. So that is Awakened Dynasty. And last but not least for the commons, and this guy has generated a lot of chatter is the Immortals Phalanx. 6 energy, 3/7 on the attack stats, 7 health, pretty whopping stats. And I believe BJ put out a video specifically talking about this guy, so definitely check that out if you haven't. And so it's got Remnant, it's got Regeneration 1, but I think the most important thing here, when it's reanimated, deploy a copy of the troop.
Oh.
So
Wow.
it's pretty scary. If you ever
Wow.
reanimate this, you're probably gonna win the game, is kind of how I see it.
And they've got that spell that reduces the cost of troops.
Implacable Conqueror. Yep.
Yeah. This guy's serious.
Yeah, I've even, so he's the first guy that's been unlocked in the raid, and so I was like, you know what, I want to play with this card. So I put 2 copies in an Orokin Implacable Conqueror deck, and it does feel pretty good when you go Implacable on 5 energy and then play this guy on 4, and like use your Orokin ability or play some other ability. It is just it has like a "you have to kill me" sign on its forehead, but that's usually going to require like 3 attacks. The best thing into this is something like Inspired Retribution, right? Just pay 5 energy, kill it, attack it with your Warlord. But the thing is, you can also just curve out and play the 5 energy Vanguard unit, and then play Phalanx, and it's gonna be an uphill battle just to even touch this thing. And what I love about it is you can just, even if they're trying to play for the board, you hit something for 7, let's say this dies, right? And then you reanimate it with your other abilities, and then you've got 2 of this thing.
This thing is crazy.
Yeah. Some people were comparing it to the first Predator tank. I don't think it's quite that level, and the only reason I see that is also because I think the format's still very fast. Like, I think if you're playing against Chaos, if you're playing against Tyranids, there's a world in which they just don't have to care about this thing. I think it's still going to be tough for them, but I will say it's still a really hefty unit. There are other cards that care about units, which we'll get into later, and an Implacable Conqueror is like incredibly good with a card like this. Just imagine, you go single Implacable Conqueror or double, in a game, like you just drop like 1 or 2 of these at the same time, and then basically your opponent has to have mass removal or something, otherwise you're probably dead. So Immortal Phalanx it is.
Yeah, I do like this card. I think it's quite cool.
It's got the regen too, like just as like a little throw on. It's gonna regen 1 health when it gets to attack. So yeah, this
Orcs will play well into this.
Yes, I think Orcs will have a pretty decent time. Like, obviously they have to do, like, this card benefits from Tomb World, because you can bring it back.
No, it don't.
Does it?
Does it come back with Tomb World?
Yeah, it's an infantry unit.
Oh, this is mental. This is mental.
Yeah, so you play these out, you work really hard to get rid of them, and then you just go, sweet, I'm going to Tomb World and get back at least one of these, hopefully. And then they have to do it all over again. So it is pretty crazy in terms of like scaling into the late game. The question is, like, can you get there, and how much is this going to matter on the board? But it's a lot of power packed into a common card, I think.
Yeah, no, it is for sure.
Well, that's Mr. Phalanx, and watch out on a Warpforge near you, because this thing is going to be there. If not, you've already played against it since it's been out on the raid, and it has been. I have been able to duplicate this, and that is pretty much GG whenever that happens. So that's been pretty sweet. But moving right along into the rares, we've got, honestly, one of my favorite arts that I've seen in the game so far, Inescapable Retribution. 5 energy stratagem, deploy 2 Tomb Blades. So you're getting a bit of a discount here, right? If you played 2 Tomb Blades, that would cost you 6 energy. It's the 1/3 flanker that has reanimate on it as well, or remnant on it. So you get to pay 5 energy to get 2 Tomb Blades, and the fact that they have remnant, right, is like ways to get them back. Just seems like a great stratagem to add to the Scarabs decks in particular, right? Like maybe they take care of your early Scarabs, and then you're able to on 6 energy, play a Scarab, or I don't know, have a couple Scarabs lying around, inescapable retribution to like deal with whatever they're trying to establish. And I don't know why, but the art just reminds me of like Star Wars pod racing.
Yeah, it's cool. And this could trigger Artifice. What is it?
Artifice. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the main reason you would run it.
This is really good because you play this, you can take something out for 6, plus you've got them having remnants, so you can bring them back. So you could later on in the game, you could kill something with 9 health with this.
Yeah, it's just good. Yeah, exactly. It's just good card advantage, right? It's a 2-for-1. You're playing Necrons. Necrons classically, don't have great card advantage, right? They want to play out their board, set up their board, and so having a card that generates 2 bodies that can get reanimated, it would require a bit of setup, but I just imagine inescapable retribution will make the cut, in terms of how many other good spells there are on 5. It seems really, really like a nice addition to the Necrons. So I'm excited to see how many more Tomb Blades I can get on the board. But yeah, and when you reanimate them with the 3-drop, it feels so good. You can do so much work. So that is inescapable retribution. Moving on to a card that Harry and I were talking about earlier, the Locust Destroyer, or Locust rather, Destroyer. 4 energy, 3/5 on the attack stats, 4 health, remnant, Destroyer, right, which means it has to attack something if it could kill it. When another troop dies, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So, salt on the wound in terms of another tool for the Scarab deck. I don't know.
Yeah, I see this. I come against it a couple of days ago in the ranked, and I just couldn't get to it.
I guess. So, what were you? Was it a Scarabs deck, or was it like Nemezer with like the 2/2 Vanguards?
It was 2/2 Vanguards.
Okay.
Weren't a Scarab with that, but his board was full. Couldn't, but like
you just could never touch it. Yeah.
Could never get there.
Yeah, I mean, he's super fragile, right, in terms of a 4-drop. But yeah, it does feel like a good card. I was kind of thinking in the Scarab archetype, but actually, yeah, of course, it can work with Nemezer, just making the 2/2 troops and reanimating them, and so you just have like infinite Vanguard, unless you've got like an AoE clear, and then this thing is just like punishing you every time you have to play into their Vanguard units that come back.
Yeah. Remember, it's a 4 cost as well, so it's not very expensive.
No, it's not. I guess you could even run this in a deck with Implacable Conqueror, and then you're playing it for 2, and playing other Vanguard units. I kind of, when I first saw this card, I didn't think it would be that great, but what you were talking about, Harry, I think it is a bit of a threat. Like, you do have to answer this thing, or it's going to snowball pretty hard. It is random damage that could sometimes hurt, just the consistency of a card, obviously. But there are a lot of ways for Necrons to put up roadblocks and different walls. So I guess this guy will be destroying.
Yeah.
He's got this cannon for an arm. My God. And it's kind of noteworthy that this has the card type Destroyer. We'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, this guy will probably be destroying quite a few things if you're not able to get to him. So moving right along, we've got the Flayed Ones pack. So 3 energy, 3/03. We know that attack stat line when it comes to like the Hounds for the Tau, or Death Cult Assassin for the Sisters of Battle, but it's got Remnant, and it also has Artifice. Deploy a Flayed One, which is this card. I know a lot of people have been like, why is this not a destroyer? Not sure why they didn't make it a destroyer, because it looks like all the destroyers. And like the Flayed One sort of flavor. But maybe, I don't know, maybe that was an intentional choice. But so you can play this for 3 energy. That's pretty cheap. If you play Implacable Conqueror, you can get this down to 1. And then when you're artificing, you're getting a bunch of these bodies. What do you think about this, Harry?
I don't think it drops itself. I think it drops the Flayed One's the other unit, innit?
Oh, I did the same thing where I just read the card wrong. Yeah, or the Flayed... Hold on, I'm going to skip us. Or no, the Flayed One, so that's the 2-drop. The true 2-drop that has Remnant. We'll look at it later, too. I just don't want to spoil the other cards we're looking at. And then it has Remnant, and if it dies and it comes back, it has Fast. Got it.
That's it, yeah.
That's what it is.
Wait,
okay.
Is it Fast or is it Rush? I'm not sure.
I think it's called Fast. Yeah, because I mean, they basically didn't exist in the game besides the Warbiker. But yes, so those got changed. I forgot a little while back. Okay, so you're playing this. You're able to get multiple of the Flayed Ones, which are really easy to clear, right? They're 2 health, 0 attack. But you have to attack them twice to get them off the board. And if you don't, they get reanimated and they can just go face. So I guess the dream with this card is obviously it lives, or the turn you play it, you're getting like, I think for this card to be worth it, you'd have to be able to play it or have it on the board and play like 2/1 energy spells. Like if you get 2 Flayed Ones out of this card, I think it's probably good enough. Because the stats on all of them are terrible. But again, if you get mashed into a deck that just can't really deal with like go wide stuff or have multiple attackers, this does feel like a different kind of Scarabs deck where you can just like have all your stuff go face if they can't deal with it.
Yeah, I'd have to see how you get on with that one in practice, but it looks cool.
I kind of want to try a combo deck with this. Like I'd be interested to try an Artifice or like Artifice synergies, maybe like Flayed Ones pack with the guy we just looked at, the Destroyer, the Locust Destroyer, and basically like try and build a board out of these sorts of cards that you can then just kind of send at your opponent, and just like get a bunch of damage off of. It's going to be way less consistent than Scarabs, because Scarabs is just way too resilient of a strategy, and it's very cheap. But I think this is kind of like a cool, different take on Necron combo. Maybe kind of aggro combo. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm willing to try that though.
Yeah. Very cool. So that's the Flayed Ones pack. So we'll kind of see what combo potential that guy has. And then the last rare we're going to look at is another Plasmacite, and I really liked the old Plasmacite that got changed, which has stealth. It's got more health now, and I think it buffs other Destroyer units. So this guy, the Damage Plasmacite, 2 energy, 1/1/3. So obviously not going to do much damage, but it's got flying, as the other ones did. But adjacent units have regeneration 2. So my understanding is this includes your Warlord, because it says unit. So your Warlord is able to swing for free because it will regenerate 2 at the end of turn. And then I guess this kind of works well with other aggressive things that can maybe trade damage with flank and then regen the health back up.
It's cool how it works on your Warlord though.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, right?
Yes, that's a cool
Get like
interaction.
a little bit of tempo in the early game. You play this out, turn 1, hit their Warlord, you heal up 2.
do you know, I'll try this one. You have to try this one out.
Yeah. It's got Remnant as well, which makes it a little bit more resilient, obviously. So they can sync, an attack with a 3 power warlord or 2 attacks, right, to kill it. But then they've got to clear it again. And I can imagine like damage plasma sight being really nice on certain turns later on because it's very cheap. So I think it does synergize well with flankers. It's not bad for like playing Necrons which want to go late, and so into aggro decks you're able to trade your health on your warlord into their units without taking too much damage back. So I feel like this could serve like a nice role in some Necron decks. The thing is, I think they're getting so many more powerful additions. I'm not sure if this is like needed, but I see why this. Like I see a couple scenarios where this card could be pretty nice, pretty helpful.
Yeah, you get this on a late taunt unit later on in the game, and it keeps healing it at that 5 cost.
Oh yeah, and which has already got a ton of armor and health, right? So it's just going to make it harder and harder to get through. Yeah, I feel like this is like a nice role player, a nice kind of like synergistic card. Yeah, with Vanguard and armor, with flank, with like kind of keeping your warlord sort of topped off a little bit. And it's a flyer. Not every deck's going to have great answers to flyers, right? So, yeah, I'm kind of talking myself up on this card. I feel like this actually might be pretty decent. So that's going to wrap us for the rares. So let's get into, I think we've only got 2 epics and 2 legendaries, but then we'll talk a little bit about this potentially new archetype to close things out. But here we've got, and I just threw a couple examples up here. We've got another card advantage spell for the Necrons, and I feel like this is what they've really been lacking in terms of what other decks have access to, and I think it's going to make them a bit more of a consistent late game powerhouse. So Dimensional Corridor, 3 energy, which is standard for most draw 2s in this game. Choose a troop from your deck, so you're going to get 3 options whenever it says choose a troop. Draw it and create a copy of it in your hand. So
that's quite cool. You
can make a copy of Immortal Phalanx, and just play a bunch of Phalanx, potentially. But I think it's more impactful with cards like Technomancer, because you almost always want multiple Technomancers if you can, right? Whether that's like Reconstitution Protocol or whatever it is to like get it back from your graveyard, so to speak. But Dimensional Corridor, if you hit it in those 3 troops that you can choose from, then great. Getting to draw an extra Technomancer essentially in your deck seems like a pretty great place to be when it comes for like the troop decks.
Yeah, no, for real.
So you're not getting any extra stats like some of these kind of draw 2s do. But what you are getting is just the option to create a powerful troop, and have an additional copy of it.
Yeah, and you're drawing it as well, yeah. Yeah, I think this is good, actually.
It synergizes pretty nicely with Implacable Conqueror, right? Like, you can play Implacable, then maybe, let's say, on the next turn, you play Dimensional Corridor, you snag, even if you need, like, some defense, you get Triarch Praetorian, get 2 of those. They both cost 1. You can play both that same turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also love the art in this. This is so terrifying. They're just like pouring out of this dimension, I think, or something.
I really like that art.
Yeah. I would not want to see that coming for me. But yeah, this sort of similar to the other spell. I think this just allows for Necrons to have a bit more consistency. I think what Imatech in particular was lacking was just that consistency piece. You could have like kind of clunky hands where like you're too slow and then you can get out aggroed. But having Dimensional Corridor early could kind of fix that. I think for Implacable Conqueror base decks, this synergizes very well. So I think just another great addition to the roster for Necrons, and I'm excited to get to see kind of the power of this card, see what it can really do. Yeah, that's Dimensional Corridor. Then we have our next and last epic, which personally I would love to break this card if it's possible. 5 energy, damaged Hexmark. We've seen some of these Hexmark destroyers before. 1/5 on the attack stats, 5 health. It's got Remnant, it's got Destroyer, and its Artifice ability says it attacks by itself. So, for a little bit of comparison, should have thrown it up there. There's the 4 energy card for Chaos, which is very popular from Buggy's aggro build, that allows for a unit to attack again. I think it says a damaged unit. So this would operate similarly. Now, there is a catch because destroyers can only attack a unit that they could kill, and if there isn't a unit that they could kill, then I guess this would go face. It's interesting because the Artifice will allow the turn that it's played to attack, right? So it almost has like fast or flank, if you will. The question is, with a fragile 5 health at 5 energy, although it does have Remnant, so you can bring it back, like how good could this card actually be? So I don't know.
I like the art. I think he's really cool.
Yeah, no, it looks very sick.
Like you said, I think there's a bit too many good cards in the Necrons at this cost.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
maybe in an aggro deck you might be able to swindle something, you know?
Yeah, it's there's a little bit of tension because like it requires Artifice, which means yes, you have your Warlord ability, but you want to be running a good amount of stratagems in your deck, and like to really get the full value out of this. This also really depends on what the board state is, you know, and maybe you'll get really nice attacks with your 5 ranged attack, but you know maybe that's just not good enough into some of the stuff that they have. It is kind of a different way to build combo with Necrons. Like I can see a world in which, you know, you Implacable Conqueror, this thing costs 3, and then like in a later turn, sort of like I guess what is it, the Keller Morph for the Gene Stealers that just starts popping things. I guess the dream is that you get this to either clear a lot of their units without having to do too much, or getting to attack their Warlord like 3 times before this dies, and then maybe reanimate it and like do that again. But it requires probably like a ton of setup, and it is just a pretty fragile card stat wise, I would say.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And another question would be, does it attack with melee or range when it attacks on its own? Does it choose?
So I that's a great question. I wish I had like a Necron rules expert to answer that question. From my experience, what I've seen is that the way that Destroyer tends to operate is that it's going to take the best attack that it can. So I think this card would be horrible if you couldn't really control what attack stat you're using. I think it's fair to assume that this is mostly going to be doing ranged attacks, but I don't actually know if that's the case. So,
or maybe whatever you left it on, you know.
Yeah, it's weird. Like these sorts of abilities in the game, whether it's like attacks again or attacks by itself, or like Destroyer can only attack, you know, a card that it can kill. Yeah, which attack stat is it potentially using? So I think with all of those things combined, this card just requires a ton of good conditions to be the best that it can be. So like I think it's got a pretty decent ceiling, but I think the floor of this card is pretty low. So I don't unless you're really building around this kind of strategy, I don't really think that this card's going to be so great.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'm pretty into these sort of combo things. So I think it'd be cool if this could work. But moving on to the even more exciting stuff, we have our legendary, which everyone probably knows by now. It is the legendary at the end of the road for the raid event, and that is Locust Lord. 6 energy, 6 health, 4/7 on the attack stats. Pretty beefy attack stats. Remnant, also a destroyer. Regeneration 2. And Backlash, create a resurrection orb in your hand, and that is the 3 energy legendary that brings back all remnants for that turn. I don't think we've had a legendary card that... Oh, no. Do we have legendary cards that generate other legendary cards? I think technically we do. But anyway, this thing is like just a house of stats and keywords. Kind of crazy.
Lot to read, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It is a destroyer, so again, like, there's kind of this drawback, right? Destroyers have to attack what they can feasibly kill first. So, a tip for playing with destroyers is that if you don't want to sink your destroyer's attack into something, you got to clear it with something else first, and then attack the destroyer into their warlord or something like that. But it's got regen 2, it's 6 health, 6 energy, big attack stats. And then the fact that it's got Remnant itself and Backlash, create a resurrection orb, which can reanimate all of your remnants. I think everyone who's playing troops is going to play this card, including, obviously, Nemezer, who's generating like a ton of these bodies that you can't kill, and you probably shouldn't because that'll waste your time. And then so Locust Lord comes down, you kill it, you get a resurrection orb, and then you just get your whole board back if you're playing Nemezer in an ideal situation.
Yeah, I'd like to play with this card and see.
Yeah.
I think that's a good legendary.
Yeah, I like his big screwdriver looking blade thing.
Yeah.
And then he's got the resurrection orb that he's holding on to. Like a football, just trying to get it through. This guy just has a lot of value packed into him. It's a relatively cheap, as far as some of the later game power level legendaries go. I feel like this will be great in Nemezer. I still think as a value card, it'll be good in any other troop-based deck. So I expect to see quite a bit of Locust Lord once he's in the game. I just think that everyone's going to want this card, aside from, I guess, Scarabs. That's really the only deck that doesn't really benefit from him. So that's Mr. Locust Lord. And of course, last but definitely not least, we have the new Necron Warlord, Ramatek the Cruel. So 2/2, 35 health. He himself is a destroyer. Noteworthy there. Talent, Hardwired Destruction, which is a rare that says give +1 melee and +1 range to a friendly unit. So that includes your Warlord, potentially, until your next turn. So it's your turn and your opponent's turn. If it is a destroyer, give it armor 1 until your next turn.
So can destroyer not go Warlord's face then?
They can. Like, that's the only instance in which destroyers don't have a restriction. Like, if there's nothing on the board and you have a destroyer that's attacking and you attack the Warlord, that attack goes through. It's only when there are other things that a destroyer has to clear first because it can kill it. That's how destroyer operates. So let's say it's your first turn, right, with Ramatek the Cruel. You have nothing else to do. You Hardwire Destruction him. He gets +1/+1 for your turn and your opponent's turn, and he gets armor 1. So you hit them for 3, you take 1. But then if they play a unit, then you have to sort of do the math. So
I like him.
yeah, man, this is our aggro Warlord, Harry.
Yeah,
we finally have one.
probably gonna be playing a bit with him. Yeah.
I'm so excited. Now, I don't know, and we're going to talk a little bit to close out our podcast today about Destroyer as an archetype, because I think there is some fragility there. We probably don't have enough cards, not to spoil the discussion, but I'm not sure that we're quite there yet. But I love this. Like, this is what I was hoping for, that when they changed the keyword to Destroyer and they made other cards Destroyers, that there would be some sort of like aggressive, scary archetype. This guy looks sick, first off. His ability is obviously much more of an aggressive tool. I guess it could be a control tool as well because of the armor. But you'd have to like be spamming it. I'm not sure that would work that well. So yeah, I'm not sure it's going to be like it's hard to beat the consistency and resiliency of Scarabs. Like, so I don't even want to compare it to that necessarily.
Yeah.
But I like this as a different option on how you want to play Necrons.
Yeah.
So that's Mr. Romtech. And then I figured, just because we're kind of on this topic of talking about Destroyers and what that's going to look like, and I'm super excited to get into him when he's released, is can we in fact destroy with the Destroyers, right? So as we were talking about earlier, we've had Flayed One, which used to just be an absolute just unplayable card, but then they changed it, and so it's got Destroyer, it's got Remnant, but when it's reanimated, it gets fast, which means it can attack the enemy warlord that turn. And so you've got like this engine with the Flayed One pack that generates these Flayed Ones, right? Then of course you've got one of the all-stars, Scorptech Destroyer here, which is just pretty much a staple. I think in every Necron deck, right?
Yeah, super good card, man.
Yeah, it's just exactly what you want. It's gonna kill the thing with flank. You live the dream, you get it back, you do it all over again. Then there's Ophidian Destroyer, which I think for a while was kind of like an underplayed legendary. I think this archetype would be kind of perfect for him to come back. So Remnant Destroyer, his artifice is stealth, which is pretty nice. He's got that scary blade just like Romtech has. And he hits pretty hard. He only has 4 health though. But when you play this and stealth it and like try to keep re-stealthing it, and it's got Remnant, you can get it back. This thing can be pretty obnoxious. I don't think it's the most powerful thing that Necrons have had, in terms of what they can do in their toolkit. But I think my first thing that I want to do is try and include, as many Destroyers as possible and see if the synergy with the, their new Warlord's ability is worthwhile. Another Destroyer here with Hexmark Destroyer that's been pretty popular, right? So 6 energy, 6 health, really pretty decent attack stats. It's got Remnant, and then it was changed to deal 1 damage to 4 random enemies. This guy can do some work, especially into certain board states.
He's been a staple, and
Yeah, and that's what I've seen. I don't know about you, but I've definitely run into this guy quite a bit. And then there's like a card that I don't think anyone's played in Locust Heavy Destroyer. It's 5 energy, 6 health, not the worst stat line, 2/6. Remnant Destroyer, when reanimated, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. So, there's these cards like Flayed One, like Locust Heavy Destroyer, where, okay, their stats are not great. They're not as powerful as some other things on curve. But if I can buff them, to go back a second to with Romtech, if I'm playing more of this kind of aggressive strategy, maybe there's something to be said for playing more Destroyers in my deck. If I had to guess, you're probably only going to play the best Destroyers. So I think you play Ophidian Destroyer, Scorptech, Hexmark. You'd play the Legendary, which is a Destroyer, the Locust Lord. Maybe you could try Damaged Hexmark as well, which is a Destroyer. You could play Flayed One's pack to generate the Flayed Ones and not actually have to play them. You can play Locust Destroyer, the rare, that deals damage when something dies. And then maybe you just play, a bit of card advantage with some of the new card advantage spells. Maybe you have like an implacable conqueror to kind of go later with, um, and maybe there's something there.
Yeah, I'm gonna try some actually. Now you've said about it being aggro and that, I'm definitely gonna get the new warlord and give it a try.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it just seems like a different play style. It's definitely more smashy, which I think Harry and I really enjoy. I mean, the other thing it could be interesting is, how much of a drawback is having Destroyer on your Warlord. Like that's something we can't really, I think, like understand until we're playing with it. And I've seen some people be like, oh, maybe he's good as a control Warlord because you can like give him armor in the early turns, and so almost like, or I guess like almost like aggro control. So I think about like Gruck, right? One of his strengths is like you can pull your Makari at a higher rate with your ability, and then like even if you're playing more of a control role in the game, with the addition of Makari, you can kind of like beat their face and then respond to what they're doing. And so it kind of reminds me of him because like with Romtech, you could just buff yourself in the early turns, trade and get a bit of a life advantage. And then in the later turns, you could buff up like your Scorptech Destroyer, which comes in and flanks, or you could buff up your Locust Lord if you needed to, or Hexmark Destroyer to like trigger his ability and make him tankier. And so like maybe you just play him kind of as like a value aggro control warlord. But either way, it's definitely a different play style, definitely a different direction and kind of archetype that they're creating for the Necrons, and that kind of has me pretty hype. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
So that's really what we got for today for you guys. As always, thanks for coming through. But from what you're seeing, Harry, so it sounds like you're pretty excited to give this new Warlord a try. But is there any card in particular that you're really interested in or excited for out of the ones we looked at today?
I like the Warlord. Obviously, the legendary, the Locust Lord is like
super pumped up.
yeah, he's gonna be obviously one you put in, and probably this damage Plasmac.
Oh yeah, the little guy who gives regen.
Yeah, regens. I think mate, I think he's undercover really good.
Yeah, I mean,
especially behind that 5 cost with the armor.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that guy's just so obnoxious to deal with anyway. And giving him regen too. Yeah, I mean, also like the damage plasma sight combos well with the new Warlord, right? Because he's a little more aggro-y. And so if you've got damage plasma sight out and Romtech, you can potentially just hit for 3 and take 0 on that turn because you're going to regen 2 health. So you would take 1 back, but then you gain 2 back, so you're netting a health on those trades. Sorry, I had to think about that because I'm bad at math. Why I choose to play card games, I'll never know. But yeah, I like that little guy. Locust Lord is just looking rather value city population him. I'm kind of interested, although I don't think it'll be terribly competitive, in like damage Hexmark as like a weird combo value piece. Kind of interested in Flayed Ones pack. Like, can you go off with that card? And then I love the new stratagems. Like, I really like Awakened Dynasty as a concept. Like, it's just very flavorful with getting reanimation protocols and drawing cards. And then I've really enjoyed playing Implacable Conqueror. So a card like Dimensional Corridor to like get more and more value out of your troops seems like a really cool thing. And I would imagine in Romtech as well, because you're going to want card advantage when you're being an aggro deck. Dimensional Corridor is great, right? So I can pull multiple, I guess you could even copy your legendaries, right? Like you pull your Ophidian Destroyer and you say, "Great, I want a copy of that," and you get 2 Ophidian destroyers. Um, so that's kind of sick, right? You can literally get double of a legendary, or double of an epic, or whatever it happens to be at that moment. Um, so that's kind of a cool thing. I think Necrons are going to be have a lot more dynamic deck building to them. It feels like there are different combo pieces. There's obviously a whole new warlord and kind of a whole new archetype to play with him. Um, so yeah, honestly, lots to be, I think, excited about in this raid.
100%.
Yeah,
I feel like, yeah, they now and yeah. Look, I played a bit of Necrons in it because I played Imhotep, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I've had a fair share of Necrons, but they didn't resonate with me too well. But
Yep.
I know people love them, and like, I'll try it, but like at the minute, oh mate, Titus is like, when I'm on the game, I just want to play Titus,
I
mate.
know, me too. Yeah, I mean it's hard not to talk about Titus too, because like obviously
Yeah.
Space Marine 2 is huge. It's blowing up right now. He is
Oh,
really
he looks so
cool.
good.
His
Yeah.
abilities, like the sort of Swiss Army knife, thing is
Bro,
so cool.
have you heard when he does with his chainsaw?
Yeah, it revs the chainsaw. I love that.
What?
That's like my favorite. Yeah,
What?
I know. I know.
Unbelievable.
And the blast
Um,
ability I've used, I think, the most actually. Like that, like being able to play more tempo and not have to like trade as much health, because I can like trade a flanker and then hit their face and blast onto the other thing that I'm trying to kill too. um like that's been sick, giving permanent stats to your flankers as well when they come in with his one of his abilities, and then of course the
yeah.
chainsaw, which is like super sick. um
Like if sometimes as well, if you go face and you use your ability, you're hitting them for free, and you're only getting 1 damage done to you.
and you're healing for one, because you heal
Yeah.
with every ability too. Yeah, it's I really think we're gonna see Titus be an actual competitive deck as soon as Ultramarines get more buffs to their infantry units. um, because he seems like such a great ability. Like he can just kind of address whatever the situation is, and he synergizes really well with flank. He synergizes well with with different units that benefit from spreading damage or going aggro face with the chainsaw. um yeah, so like I think it's really hard to build a competitive deck with him right now that's anywhere near consistent into all the power level of many of the other factions, including Necrons. um but yeah, it is kind of fun to have like you know working on Titus, and then also when these Necron cards drop, working on that sort of archetype too.
Yeah, well, you have got a lot to yeah, loads of content
Yeah,
basically.
lots to look forward to. I mean, the aggro players are happy. We've got Titus. We've got Romtech. Just so funny that we both really enjoy that kind of play style. So that's really cool. I think they did a good job with this release. I feel like there's, I know people are concerned about the guy that can duplicate himself. He is pretty scary. I do think that they have more tools to gum up the ground and like put up walls and kind of make it harder to really make any headway. Um, but I think combo is going to keep them in check a bit. And like with the game being kind of fast at some points, I'm not so sure some of these beefier Necron units are going to be able to like live up to their full potential. Uh, so I guess I think the power level is like at a pretty good place. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe we'll see a different thing. But my overall take with this raid is that the cards are flavorful. They've got some cool stuff going on. Got some combo. Got the destroyer archetype kind of up and running. Hopefully, um, yeah. So there's lots to do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So Harry and I will definitely, I imagine, we'll be swapping lists and talking about this. And depending on how the timeline is, I think we could potentially do another kind of like Necron's deck tech video on the podcast. That was really fun with Slither last time. So that's something we may get in motion pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, to wrap us up here, lots to look forward to in terms of what we have basically in the game now. But also, I really think with the full release of the game likely happening next month, and with Imperial Guard that we know is on the roadmap and due next up, I don't think there's anything else that should come before them. I guess maybe if they want to sneak in an Eldar reinforcement, but we haven't heard any whisper of that yet. So I think this fall, especially going into the next couple of weeks, is going to be a busy time for the Warpforgers. So, yeah, Harry, what are you? So it sounds like you've been working on Titus. You're going to play some RomTech. Just to tease a little bit, how are you feeling about the Imperial Guard when they arrive? How interested are you?
I'll play them, but I've always, look, Titus is a thing in the towel, but I always like the villains, so they're like the furthest from the villains. They're like your army,
everyday good guy.
But, yeah, but I'm still interested in them. I still play them, but I'd have to look at their cards. The thing is, I don't even know any of obviously you probably seen the tabletop unit, so you probably know
a little
the
bit.
warlords already, and you know what units are coming. The only unit I know is the tank you told me about from the
the Baneblade, or the Lehman Russ,
the Lehman Russ, So really, I do look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And it's great to be continually coming back to the table and having these card talk episodes and really having so much card to talk about. So that's going to be us for today. Thanks as always, Harry, for joining and letting me drone on
Thank
and
you for having me.
As always, it's our pleasure to bring this, and we'll get in a bonus episode with Necrons in terms of some deck building with the new Warlord. But rest assured, we will definitely see you guys back for the next big content announcement, which should be Imperial Guard. So other than that, thank you guys for joining, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you.